Hi everyone, it's Kath here. Today I'm joined by a virtual Matt who you can't see, but he is here, I promise. He will speak in a moment.
I'm even waving at you.
There you go, he's waving at us. I think it's because he's not wearing very much, but he says it's not. And Mark, who you all know and love, he's actually got a coffee with him. See, I've failed completely and all I've got is water with me today. Yeah. So modern slavery, we're going to use this slightly differently. As normal, if you've got any questions for us at all, just put them into the chat area and I'll pick those up as we go along. And feel free to ask a question at any stage. We have a slightly longer PowerPoint presentation this time because this is a very serious subject area and we wanted to put over some actual facts as well in this subject area. We are recording as always, so it will be available on the website afterwards if you'd like to have a look at it there. And we're really going to split today's chat into two halves. As always, we'll finish exactly on the half hour, but the first half will be with Matt, who is the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for Thames Valley, which is the area that we live in Harwell. And Matt, thank you so much for coming and joining us today. And then the second half, we'll move over to Mark, who is a commercial specialist, works in contract management and procurement. And we want to look at how businesses could actually do something in order to tackle modern slavery alongside what the rest of the population and indeed the police are doing. So let's crack ourselves on. Becky, if you can take us to the next slide, that'll give everybody some understanding of who we've got in the room because they can't see Matt otherwise. So as I said, it's myself, Kath Convery, Mark Waterman to the right, and then Matthew is here. You can hear him, but you can't see him. Let's move on again, please, Becky. So modern slavery, I'm not going to insult you by reading it, so I'll just give you a couple of seconds to have a read. So the biggest problem for me in modern slavery and the amount of work I've done on it recently, I've attended quite a few lectures and presentations on this area recently, is that what we're thinking of modern slavery often is the type of thing that you've seen in the capture of people when they've just been going to pick on the seashore and things like that, or maybe a nail bar. But it's far bigger than this. And it's a growth area. Some of you will have seen that Boohoo, who's one of the clothing companies, recently got fined for a modern slavery case. So it can happen to any company. They could have it in their supply chain, and it's obviously something that in this country we'd like to be taking out as quickly as possible. Becky, could you move us on to the next slide? I was really surprised about this one, Matt. The number of cases are going up and up and up on this. And as it says in the title, it could well be because we're now more aware of it. But is that what you're seeing in the Thames Valley? Is it an area of increasing problem?
Yeah, definitely. But I think you're right. It is about increased awareness. And when you look at the definition on the previous slide, I think you're quite right. The key is exploitation. And people will often have a preconceived idea of what modern slavery is, whether it's genuinely modern of some of the sort of cockle pickers in Morecambe or that's that type of work, or a more modern take on traditional slaves. The idea of someone literally being kept in chains. People still think of that. The key to modern slavery is its exploitation. And we see it in all different forms of work and forced labour. It bleeds over into what may just be sharp commercial practice of seeking to underpay workers, but it bleeds over into the criminal element, to the real oppression of individuals who can be trafficked into the country in fear of their lives, in fear of their families' safety back home. So it covers a wide spectrum, and I think the realisation of that in recent years is what's led to this increase. I mean, Theresa May, when she was Home Secretary and Prime Minister, has been a real champion of this topic. I personally don't think modern slavery is a particularly helpful label to it, because
I'm with you completely.
We don't really know what it is. I always think of it as exploitation, and whether or not that is county lines drug gangs exploiting 14, 15-year-old children, or someone who has got some mental capacity issues as an adult, and they're being exploited for their labour, and everybody in between. I think that's the key characteristic: exploitation.
So I think for me, even the term county lines doesn't help, because I think unless you're related to the police, you're going, what on earth is that? You know, I thought it was literally lines of drugs that people were taking, as in, you know, sniffing lines of drugs, which of course it's not. It's to do with telephones, and you know, it's to do with young people in particular who are being exploited in that way. But the term is not well understood by most of the population, I think, and that, you know, along with this modern slavery label, it is not well understood, which I think is a real challenge. Becky, can we move ourselves on again? So that these, again, I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to read this slide, guys. So when I first saw this slide, and it was discussed with me with a police constable from a police inspector from Manchester, I was frankly horrified. This concept of a family business, and you'll see in a slide in a moment that it is, you know, large groups of families who are in effect being arrested. And that they're experts in this. So they are persuading people, and unfortunately from my background, I'm ex-military, it's often military or people that are sleeping rough that are being persuaded to come into these these homes. So they're being persuaded to come and do a job, they're being taken off the street, they are moved into a house, and then the house is full of goods that they can't afford, and to do a job that is never going to pay the amount of money that they're paying out for these goods that they can't afford. So they're in this awful trapped piece of exploitation, you know, this whole piece. And I don't know if you are we seeing a lot of that sort of thing in the Thames Valley, Matt, as far as you're aware?
I mean, I think numerically it is probably still, thankfully, quite small, but it is absolutely on the increase. And I think it's probably the fact that we're seeing it, we're recognising it more. I think you're right, the way people often get trapped into it. We think, you know, we see the effects of this, and we often think to people, well, why on earth would you ever get yourself into that situation? And it's very often a really simple step, and someone's taking some help that they're offered. Going back to the county lines example with teenage children, there's this example called the chicken shop, the fried chicken example, where you meet someone in a fried chicken shop, someone will say, can you just take this package across town for me? And on their way, they will be robbed. They'll be robbed by the same gang who's sent them with it. But they'll come back and say, well, I'm really sorry, but this happened to me on my way there. I've had whatever it was in the package, I don't know what it was, stolen from me. And they say, well, that's fine, don't worry, hope you're okay. But you now owe us the £5,000 that was the £5,000 worth of drugs that you were transporting. So they've tried to do a favour for a friend, someone they thought was a friend, and they've ended up getting trapped into this cycle. And it's all very well, those of us saying, well, you know, go and ask help from your parents, from the police, from a teacher, or in the case of adults, an example you gave, Kath, of someone who's gone for some sought some help with accommodation, and so go to the authorities. Well, how can you? Because you've already got yourself in so far that often the victim themselves is in fear of the impact from going to the authorities.
Yeah, and they're also taking things like their benefits books off them. So they're claiming, these gangs are claiming these guys money that they get normally from the state, and it's going straight into the gangs' pockets rather than into the individuals' pockets. You know, the last two bullets, they're maximising the benefit claim for each victim. They're opening bank accounts in the victims' names, and then they're withdrawing money from that bank account. You know, it is very, very organised, and that's, I think, the real danger. And that's probably why, for me, the term is all wrong, because that's not modern slavery in the traditional term. You know, you said earlier about chains, and, you know, that we're not talking about somebody here that's chained. They are literally being forced to do something because they have no cash coming in. And you know,
I think with this and a lot of organised crime gangs, we need to recognise they have a very good, very effective business model, and we often dismiss them as criminals and lowlifes. And actually, in order to fight them properly, we need to understand how their business model works. because it may be illegal, but it is also very effective. And if we don't properly understand how they work, we won't ever be able to combat them properly.
No, I completely agree with you. Let's just move on a slide. I can see I've got a question in from Claire, and I'll come back to that in a moment, Claire, if that's okay, because I think we will talk about that in a moment. These are all news broadcasts, so they are real. Okay, yeah, they're real. They're real criminals. They have been jailed for the work that they've been doing. You know, family-run trafficking gang jailed for slavery, gang jailed for trafficking vulnerable people from Latvia in that particular case. UK's largest ever modern slavery ring smashed, and as I said, a commercial company recently being charged for modern slavery events, and they're not in the newspapers in the way that we're describing. But these are large groups, and there will be a quartermaster. There will be somebody that takes, that befriends somebody. That, you know, it is pure exploitation. You know, we're talking about exploitation on the line all the time now. This is all exploitation of people that you know, they've met at the chicken shop, or they've met at McDonald's or wherever. That it's exploitation of them as well. It's just terribly sad. Are the fines against this sort of thing, are the time that they're doing quite long, Matt? Is it you know, something that you get a lot of time for?
It really can vary, because, as I said, the offence itself can have a wide range from simply paying someone below the minimum wage versus literally keeping someone locked away from the rest of society and forcing them to work. So the sentences do or should reflect the crime, and I think that's in. We've had a number of cases locally. At Redbridge Hollow, just outside Oxford, there was a modern slavery case. We've just had a number of arrests elsewhere in South Oxfordshire in the last couple of weeks on modern slavery, and I would expect, on what limited knowledge I've got, those cases you're probably looking at somewhere between 5 and 10 years for those. So certainly not insignificant jail terms, but I think increasingly, and this may feed back into why we're seeing increasing reporting of it. Not only are we noticing it more, it's increasingly become a way of charging people. So the gang that was arrested in southern Oxfordshire last week were guilty of a wide range of other offences, but there was evidence around modern slavery. So it was relatively easy to put a prosecution together on there, but we know they were doing a hell of a lot of other stuff as well. So it's becoming, if you like, a prosecution of choice as well. But we need to make sure those sentences do fit the crime.
And do you think that there would have been an increase in COVID? Because obviously, you know, during lockdown proper, people knew where people were. The police knew where the criminals were. Great. But yeah, we're not in lockdown proper any longer. Is there likely to be an increase as people have got less money to spend?
I fear we probably will see that. COVID's brought about some strange impacts from policing. Actually, some of those gangs we've been able to tackle really well, because even the gangs stayed at home because they didn't want to catch it either. Yeah. So anybody who was out and about was very conspicuous. The gangs stayed at home. The drugs market fell through. You know, the price of drugs skyrocketed because supply was really difficult. So and the police actually had a bit more time, because there were a lot less of the normal business going on, and it put a lot of effort into some of those longer running investigations. But as we come out of that, undoubtedly, in the same way we're seeing, you know, a huge spike in domestic abuse being reported of what's happened over the last 3 or 4 months. I think there will be a lot of people who have found themselves in very difficult situations, and there will be criminal gangs seeking to exploit that.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you. I think it's going to be a growing problem. Becky, could you take us on a couple of slides, because I really want to talk. I want to move us to what can businesses do about this, because you know, it is more than just what can the police do about it. It is all our responsibility. Part of that responsibility is being more aware, but you know, part of the responsibility is also making sure that you and your supply chain don't have this sort of practice in your supply chain, you know, in order to try and get rid of it. If you can take us on one more slide. This next slide is giving the sorts of things that they're suggesting can be done. But for me, Mark, it's, you know, I'd like to take it down into what you and I often talk about: sourcing first of all, or procurement first of all, and then contract management. Again, let's just give them a couple of minutes to have a read of this. So I'm going to start with the obvious. So sourcing, to me, in sourcing, you should have been doing a should cost modeling.
Yeah.
And you should do that in your normal life as well. You know, if I go past somebody who's a nail bar and it's going to take me an hour to get my nails done and they're only going to charge me £5 for my nails, then there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Because that's less than minimum wage. So either they're not spending an hour on me or there is an exploitation piece in place. You know, same with my car. If it takes them 3/4 of an hour to wash my car and there are 7 of them working on it, and that, you know, I've only charged £15, then it can't be, they cannot be paying their people the minimum wage at the moment, or the living wage. So that's down to me. And to a certain extent, I think procurement officers, it's also down to them, because they can work out the should cost modelling. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, it is a great example to show the kind of logic of course, it's going to cost more than £5 to spend an hour on your nails. Sorry. And I think actually procurement or sourcing managers actually have a much better opportunity, because they can ask those questions. Say, okay, so if it's £5, how are you coming to that cost? Is it sustainable? Is it realistic? You know, and Claire is obviously asked that question on how do we spot it. Now, there's always going to be this tension with price, wanting to get to the best value of money. However, if a price is significantly lower, there's always been that question mark in my head. Why is this so much lower? You know, what's the quality standards of something that we're being delivered? There are some, reading over some of the studies that have been done on this, there are some particular areas of procurement where we see more of this modern slavery.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of these is obviously fashion, which is something that, you know, if you buy a company branded shirt, you could be buying into that, you know, so it's something that affects every organization. Another thing where it's quite common is in IT equipment as well. So particularly in those areas. And I was just looking at the Modern Slavery Act of 2015, because I'm a little bit sad. And it also says in there that which would involve the commission of an offence under that section if it took place in England and Wales. So to me, that points to the fact that we need to be drilling down into our supply chain, understanding the country of origins, understanding all those layers of supply chain and how that's really built up. And one of the key things I think in the arsenal is to take a site visit to your potential suppliers and say, okay, so you can do this for £5. Let's come and take a look, you know, because it could be that they just dip your hands into a pot of paint and off you go. You know, absolutely, you know, £5. Away you go.
You know, that facilities management is another classic area for problems in this space. I mean, your facilities management, you don't get paid very much to do some of the jobs there. You know, cleaning, porters in hospitals, they don't get paid that much. If the staff are turning over very regularly, if you don't see the staff at the beginning, I mean, this is in contract management, but, you know, you'd obviously be, again, walking the shop floor in order to see, have I got a stable workforce or not? You know, and asking to see that stats on the workforce is a reasonable ask for me for a contract manager. I mean, they could put in the PQQ, you know, pre-qualification, they could put the question about, have you checked your supply chain? Can you say who your supply chain is? But for me, the first thing has to be, is the cost realistic? And, you know, they should be asked, they should know, you know, if it's a building that we're going to clean, how many hours of cleaning does that require? They should have some understanding of what the industry norm is, and therefore what the price is likely to look at. You know, we've got more than enough models that tell you that, okay, it's not just the cost of the person, but it's also the national insurance, the hiring of the person, their uniform, etc., etc. You as a procurement officer can do that working out as well. And I think that's a really, you know, you could cut away a lot of this if we, the purchasers, stopped acting so completely ridiculous and actually went, well, no, you can't do it for that money. Do you agree?
I absolutely agree. And, you know, I mean, I take the point on asking the question in the PQQ. And I think, you know, the UK is held up as one of the countries that's actually taking more action on this than some of the others. But for me, I want to see more from the procurement professional than ticking a box that says that they've got a modern slavery policy. You know,
Yeah.
use your common sense, use your intuition. You know, and in the case of, and I know we're going to trip into contract management a little bit, but in the case of soft FM services, they're going to be on your site. You know, ask the cleaner how they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, gather some intelligence. You know, and
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that's going to be absolutely solid evidence, but you may build up enough of a picture to investigate.
This is the thing I think that worries me the most about that first bullet on this slide, because it's so easy for a CEO, board management to make a commitment and prioritization. You know, we've got those up the yin yang at the moment. There's lots of those sorts of commitments, and you could ask in you know, in sourcing, in procurement for that commitment. But actually, that's not you checking anything. So if you've done your should cost modeling, and when you get into contract management, if you then go and do that walking around and asking the question of the people that you are in effect employing through somebody else, then you've started to expose some of the problem area, I think, there. You know, so Claire's secondary part of her question was, you know, how do we spot it? Well, I guess this is a question for both you, for Matt, you as well. I mean, from my perspective, from a commercial perspective, you should be able to spot it just by the cost and quality, or you should at least have it alarmed to you because of the cost and quality. But are there other things that we should be looking at from a how do we spot it? What do you think, Matt?
Oh, I think you're quite right that it goes beyond the cost. I think from a corporate point of view, checking the cost is reasonable is clearly a great starting point. But as Mark said, just asking people, knowing what's going on in your organisation and the people who are supplying you, because it may not be directly in your supply chain. You don't know what else is going on in other people's lives. And forget about the Modern Slavery Act. We've all just got a responsibility to each other as human beings to make sure that people are okay. And I think there are some allegedly telltale signs about people looking dishevelled, and people who turn up for work who aren't properly kempt, who behave unusually. But I think that actually the truth about when you can't even see me, the truth about modern slavery, as I say, it's exploitation. It happens in all sorts of forms. So I'm not sure there really is anything to look for. It's a case of talking to people, understanding your organisation, your supply chains, and if it doesn't look right, asking a few more questions, because it could be happening in so many different ways. I think to say there is an obvious sign to look for oversimplifies it, because it gives people the get out that if they haven't seen X, then it can't be modern slavery and it's not my problem anymore. A bit of professional curiosity, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think that the case that we talked about earlier, that's still going through the courts, so obviously without prejudice, it's quite plausible that they hadn't checked. So they're saying we didn't know, but they hadn't checked. And this is fashion, as you said, Mark. It's an area of exploitation. We know that it's an area of exploitation. So it's a challenge. So the fourth bullet talks about build an internal understanding and capacity. I mean, to a certain extent, it's an understanding of your business, isn't it? It's an understanding of where does this kit come from? How does it actually work? What's the internal gubbins that makes up or whatever I'm buying? And again, what are each of the costs of those parts?
And I mean, if we take a look at COVID, there would have been a huge spike in demand for face masks. Imagine if there's a brand new company that comes to the market to deliver a service that we need just happens at that time, and they can deliver 10,000 units within the next week. I mean, the delivery timescales have got to ask a question as well. How can they afford to deliver such large quantities in such a short time as well, if that makes sense?
I completely agree. Again, is it a doable proposition, what we're talking about? And if it's not, then really, you just cannot, you should be able to work it out.
Absolutely. And I think it's key for people to realize some of the numbers on this, and I was looking at the stats to suggest that there's potentially 140,000 people in modern slavery in England and Wales today. 140,000 people in this country, and I was reading the 2018 report on this, and it had some examples in there where it said that a lady had been transferred to London to live with her sister, and she was forced to work for her sister in a housekeeping capacity, and she was just fed bread and water, and that was a place near Harrods in London. So this is a topic that could be happening next door to you, as well as within your business. So I think key to actually tackling this is education, as a strong part, education within your organization to be able to ask those questions and have the confidence to ask those questions.
It really, honestly, I said that I'd been to several conferences on this in the last couple of months, and I have, and I've met a lot of people who are very senior on this area. But some of the stories they come out with, honestly, it's horrific, and it really makes you think. It makes you think: can I do something different? Can I make some changes? Guys, thank you so much for your time. Matt, I know that you're there somewhere because I can hear you clinking away. So Mark was just trying to keep his face very, very straight at that point. Thank you so much for your time. As always, really interesting topic. Becky, could you just take us back to the slide where everybody's details are? But really interesting topic. I'm really grateful for your time. Next week, we've got a completely different area, because this one was, almost morbid in its topic area, because, this is serious stuff. But I think that commercial managers and procurers can do something about it. I think we as individuals can do something about it. Next week's topic is about finding your name, your native genius. It's with a very close friend of mine, Charlie Welsh, who has been absolutely amazing in some of the work that she's done. So I'm hoping she can talk through some of the work that she's done as well. But really good to see you all. It's supposed to be an incredibly hot weekend. I know that Mark will be out running because he's just slightly insane like that. And I'm sure that Matt is going to go out with a puppy because he's got a brand new puppy, Mark. You'd be very impressed. He's a tiny little one.
That's the clinking in the background you can hear.
Hope to see you both soon, and thank you so much for your time. And guys, we'll hopefully speak to all of you soon as well. Take care now, everybody. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.